Good morning, Sophia. What are you doing?
I'm levitating, Rose. Get lost.
In the 1980s, millions of people made an appointment to stay home Saturday nights and spend it with Estelle Getty.
Just a little depressed.
She's one of the reasons for the success of the show with young people. I think they get such a kick out of little Estelle telling Big B off and knuckles under her and everything. I think that's part of the success.
After a 40-year career in show business, she finally became one of television's hottest stars.
The kids adored her. Everybody adored her.
Growing up in New York City, Estelle dreamed of Broadway stardom.
It wasn't the most respectful thing to do on the Lower East Side. Gangsters were welcome, actors were not.
But it took 20 years on stage before the right part came along.
I knew that if I put the right lines in her mouth, she could rip their hearts out.
The Broadway success was tempered by the prolonged and painful deaths of family and friends.
She embraced the gay community and people with AIDS in a way that, at the time, few celebrities chose to do.
Now, an elusive disease has diminished her ability to enjoy her professional triumphs.
We have attempted to treat Estelle with various medications that are used to treat Parkinson's disease.
I was always very movable and active and going and coming and doing. And to lose any part of my freedom so late in life is almost devastating.
But Estelle still finds her rewards through the smiles on the faces of her countless fans.
When people see me on the street, the first question they ask me is, "How's the old lady? How's Sophia? Oh, she was my favorite."
I'm Valerie Harper, and this is an intimate portrait of my friend, Golden Girl Estelle Getty.
Hi, Ma, where you going?
Down to the boardwalk. I like to sit and watch the old guys rearrange themselves when they come out of the war.
She's feisty, quick-witted, and always sharp with a comeback.
Would you like a ride?
No, I want to do cartwheels for 6 miles. Get your keys, let's roll.
Estelle Getty shares many of the same traits with her famous character, Sophia Petrillo, from the popular television comedy, The Golden Girls. But Estelle is more than just a source of one-liners. Her affinity for others has proven that her heart is as big as her sense of humor.
It's always strange to meet someone that you like a lot before you know them. You know, somebody like Estelle, who I admired her work for so long, and then to get to know her and to have her personality and her heart far exceed your expectation is very fulfilling, because oftentimes in show business, the opposite is true.
People adore your mother. For me, she's my mom. Okay, and she'll always be Estelle Gettleman, Barry Gettleman's mother. And I've always related to her as that way. And no matter what a success, I was also somebody who grounded her in the fact that, no, you're my mom. And all of a sudden she'll smile and say, of course, that's what I am. You're my baby.
It's not just that she believed in her dream and made it come true. That happened. That she had her marriage, raised her children, and then was able to take this dream that had been sitting in the drawer, and it was finally time for Estelle to have her dream. And to have that dream, and so much bigger than she could have ever dreamed that dream could be.
On July 25, 1923, the Lower East Side of Manhattan was abuzz with hundreds of thousands of new immigrants from all over Europe. And on that day, Sarah and Charles Schur, both Jewish immigrants from Poland, celebrated the birth of their new baby girl, Estelle.
She was born at home, and they called her Estelle. At that time, I couldn't pronounce her name. I called her Etty, and to this day, I still introduce her as Etty.
The building the Schur family lived in served two purposes. It housed the glass shop, which Estelle's father owned, and the family's apartment, which was located in the back of the store.
Our father had a store, and his business was putting glass into automobiles or trucks.
He was very respected because having your own business was a very big thing in those days. It showed that you were doing okay.
And in back of the store, there was a big kitchen where my mother cooked. We came home from school, we did our homework there. We ate our dinner there, and then we had an apartment. We'd go upstairs, and that's where we slept.
One luxury Charles Schur afforded his family was frequent trips to the local theater.
Every Friday night, after my father's last job, we would all go to the Academy of Music, which is on 14th Street, and we'd see a movie and live entertainment.
And they had 5 acts of vaudeville. That meant a singer, a dancer, a skating star, anything that would take somebody's mind off his trouble. I saw all these wonderful people coming out and singing and dancing and doing all of these things, and I thought, that's it. That's where I belong.
Estelle was excited about becoming an actress, but not everyone was thrilled with the idea.
My father, I remember once saying, "You're so beautiful, you think you can be an actress?" Which was his way of telling me to forget it.
She never thought she was pretty, and she decided that she better be funny so that she could get friends and be on the winning team.
After graduating high school, Estelle continued to live at home with her parents. She was expected to find a job, but she had a burning desire to be an actress.
Well, people used to ask my parents, "So what's going to be with her?" And my father said, it's a phase she's going through. She'll be all right." They were a little bit nervous about that. It wasn't the most respectful thing to do on the Lower East Side. Gangsters were welcome. Actors were not.
So she compromised. She found secretarial work, which would allow her to leave early to audition for plays.
I was an actress, I was a secretary, and I was anything else anybody wanted me to be for money. That was the beginning of the way I was going to lead my life, and that was okay for me.
During her 20s, Estelle appeared in small plays throughout New York City.
It really bothered my parents a lot. They thought there was something wrong with a girl who would come home from being in Lower New York at 11:30 at night. But I did. By that time, I was already doing plays.
In 1949, Estelle was at a party with her theater friends and was taken aback by a man who was able to keep up with her quick wit. He was Arthur Gettleman.
I walked over to him when I was introduced, and he said, "Hello, would you marry me?" And I said, "I'll call up my beautician and I'll be right out." And we laughed, and actually we got married 9 months later.
As my father tells it, he was a shy fellow, and it was in his interest to marry somebody who was very outgoing and very social, and my mother fit the bill.
Estelle and Arthur settled in the Bronx, and Arthur went into business with her father at the glass shop. Soon after, the young couple had their first child, Carl. The Bronx apartment was getting too crowded for the growing family. 2 years later, after Estelle had their second boy, Barry, the Gettlemans decided to move to Queens.
Well, we grew up in a place called Bell Park Gardens, and it was a real community. It was actually a cooperative that had been built for Jewish war veterans, primarily of the Second World War.
Bell Park Gardens, I believe, was uniquely liberal. The constituency was such that their politics leaned in that area. We used to have a sign on our window that said, "Peace is the only solution."
Estelle kept a frantic schedule and was intent on having it all.
My family, I would say, was atypical in that my mother worked, which was pretty much unknown at that time. And she was a whirling dervish. She got up in the morning, she got us prepared for school, then she headed into the city. She would have her job, and then at her lunch hour, she would go out and do open auditions, run back to work.
I'd come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when my little guy came home from school, and then I made and served supper about 6 o'clock in the evening, and then I put out all night clothes, things to go to bed with. And somebody said to me, "Do you realize you're working 4 jobs?" But I didn't really notice it at all, and it was worth it.
Now, as kids growing up, we didn't realize exactly what a level of effort that took. In retrospect, it was incredible what she was doing.
Nevertheless, Estelle continued to find her way onto the stage.
Mom was always an actress. It was something we grew up with, and we were all aware of the fact that she was an actress.
I felt like I had found a treasure, the treasure being the theater.
Coming up on Intimate Portrait, Estelle meets a man who would make her a Broadway star.
I said to myself, I'm stuck writing a third play anyway. Why not have a mother?
And later, intense stage fright almost derails Estelle's golden opportunity.
I was so terrified that I'm going to freeze in this spot and not be able to move.
It was the mid-60s. Estelle was working as a secretary by day, acting in the local theater at night, and raising 2 boys with her husband, Arthur. But she would still find the time to see the latest movies and plays with her close group of friends.
We did go to the Broadway theater with her, or to off-Broadway with her. We would turn to Estelle and say, are we enjoying this? Is this a good play? Are we having a good time?
She had to dictate whether we liked something or didn't like something.
Estelle was our mentor, our star, all the time.
Estelle and her friends were more than just casual theater goers. They counseled each other on husbands, children, and on life's challenges. They shared tears, laughter, and food at a table in the local diner.
She was always the focus of attention, even long before success. She was always the person who did a lot of the organizing, wanted to get people together, and Jewish people focus a lot of their social activities around eating, so the diner became the place.
Being with women with whom I was attached by an invisible thread, all of us were. We all came from different places and lived in different circumstances, but we felt totally relaxed, and we had such fun, and Estelle was frequently the crux of all of it.
We would hurriedly leave dinner for our spouses, our children, and rush to the diner. And at the diner, we had our favorite booth, and that's where we did our thing.
We all sit there and talk. And all her friends were quite educated people, and people that read.
We all sat together and told stories about our husbands and about our families, and laughed and laughed and laughed, and frequently they were stories that Estelle had told dozens of times, but they were still funny when she told them again.
At the end of the meal, when we got the check, she would ask, tax, who had tax?
It was 1976. Her children were grown, and Estelle had more time to study acting. Sometimes her own family provided the lessons.
Sometimes I feel like a lot of my life was a scene study for Estelle Getty, you know. Sometimes you'd think there had been a big scene being built up there, and you wondered, you know, how much of this is just your normal family interaction, and how much of this is a play that somebody's writing.
Though Estelle had pursued her career with dauntless fervor, spending over 20 years performing in small plays even made her question why she should continue.
I felt like giving up because I didn't want to make myself any more unhappy than I had to be. And I thought, well, so few people do make it. I don't care whether I make it. I just want to be there.
She continued to show up at the theater just for the love of acting, but stardom was about to find her anyway. She met a young playwright and was so impressed with his work that she asked if he would write a part for her in his next play. The young playwright, Harvey Firestein, wrote a part inspired by both Estelle and his own mother.
I knew that if I put the right lines in her mouth, she could rip their hearts out.
I read the play, and I was smitten with it. And I asked him to give me a part of the mother.
And I said to myself, I'm stuck writing a third play anyway. Why not have a mother? And I went home and I wrote the third act of Torch Song, which is called Widows and Children First, with Estelle in mind.
Not only did Estelle play the part of the mother, Mrs. Beckoff, on stage, but she became a surrogate mom to all the other actors.
She was the only one in the cast that had a job. She was still his secretary at that time, and she was the only one in the cast that could afford to buy dinner. She was the only one that had a car. She was the only one who had her home. She's the only one who had a real life. The rest of us were sort of vagabonds. So Estelle was like, and it wasn't just an age thing, Estelle was like a grown-up to us. So we had to listen to her.
Torch Song Trilogy dealt with a wide range of highly controversial issues for the 70s, such as homosexuality, AIDS, and cross-dressing. Estelle was not fazed in the least by its subject matter and was very proud to be associated with the show.
She loved the theater, and she loved experimental theater, and she hung out at La Mama, and at La Mama there was drag queens and, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and I think that she didn't have a problem with it, and I think that Arthur did whatever he was told by Estelle, and, you know, and Barry, and they, you know, that's who their mother was.
Mom says, let me take you backstage to meet Harvey. And I walk backstage, and there's this 6-foot, you know, 300-pound drag queen shaving his legs and putting mascara on, and I was just taken aback, to say the least.
The play quickly moved from the La Mama Experimental Theater on the Lower West Side of New York City to an off-Broadway theater in Greenwich Village called the Glines. But it didn't last long there either. The immense popularity of the play moved it uptown to Broadway.
It was the hottest show you could. As a matter of fact, after a while, you couldn't get tickets to it. You had to wait three months to get tickets to Torch Song Trilogy.
The experience on Broadway was absolutely overwhelming. It was the pinnacle of success. Her greatest dream was being actualized, and it was even better than her wildest fantasy.
It was an amazing performance and an amazing show. And, you know, nowadays plays about people being gay and AIDS and homophobia and the life of alternative lifestyle drag queens. It's almost commonplace. You know, it's on sitcoms now. It's not, but at the time, that was a very profound play to be in.
I know that her performance in Torch Song changed a lot of lives. I know that there are gay people who came in with their parents to the theater, barely able to look at each other, and left with their arms around each other.
Even though Estelle did not appear until the final act of the play, audiences left the theater night after night talking about her powerful performance.
She was in the third act of Torch Song Trilogy, and only the third act. And she would sit backstage and sense what was working, what wasn't. And she'd come on stage in that third act and she'd smoke them. She was great.
When that front door opened and that little woman walked in her bright turquoise suit with her oranges from Miami, just arriving from Florida, I don't know how many times I saw her do it, hundreds of times. It ripped my heart out. Threw it on the ground. You could have done a tarantella on my heart.
It was a bright little elf that came out on that stage, just full of vinegar. She was really telling him what was what. And she took over, as far as I was concerned. She took over the play.
Her performance was really honest, I think, and fair and loving, yet biting, yet mean-spirited, yet kind. And it was very, it was full of humanity. You know, it could have been done as one note, that part. Just kind of the snappy, conniving, annoying. But it wasn't. You could see the warmth and the love that she had for him throughout.
After years of performing in obscurity, Torch Song Trilogy was allowing Estelle to finally enjoy the fruits of her labor.
Mom was going from having been somebody that was enormously talented but obscure in the public eye to somebody who was becoming, at least in the New York theater circles, quite a well-known personality.
Coming up on Intimate Portrait, Estelle's Broadway triumphs turned to tragedy by the untimely deaths of her fellow actors.
A lot of creative people that she knew and really loved had suffered with this, and it really broke her heart.
And later, Estelle finds superstardom in her golden years.
How could anyone think they're going to have a life that went from virtual obscurity to being world famous?
It was the early 80s, and for the first time in her life, Estelle was able to give up her day job and make a living as an actress. She received a lot of attention starring in Broadway's hit play, Torch Song Trilogy. Famed film director Peter Bogdanovich noticed her work and decided to cast Estelle in a film about a boy with a disfiguring disease called Mask, starring Cher.
Hey, Ma, want to do the windows next? Gramps?
She got a part in the movie Mask, and while she didn't say much in the movie, she was incredible.
Honey boy! Honey boy!
What are you gonna do? Try out for the Knicks? Look how tall he's getting, Evelyn. Hey, come on. Fast. Come on, fast, quick. Get the water.
Hey, stop, you pull out your back. Exhaust the boy.
Yeah. So, show us a new house, huh?
Abe, don't start anything.
Yeah.
You promised, Abe.
All right.
She decided that she was no longer just a mother and a wife. She was becoming a whole person all by herself, and she was able to do things that she could never have conceived she could do before.
Arthur and Estelle's marriage began to change with Estelle's newfound success.
Mom was a lot more nocturnal. Dad liked to be in bed by 8 o'clock, so they were really working at different shifts. I'd say that after a while they started living in shifts. Dad going to work, doing his thing, coming home, crashing out, Mom putting dinner on the table and then taking off and living this whole second life.
I think Estelle Getty was dying to get out of Estelle Gettleman.
Estelle's Broadway career was thriving. She was the toast of the town and performed to packed houses night after night. It all seemed like a dream to her, but what made her wake up was the disease that began to claim the lives of her fellow actors.
Our pianists started coming in with these articles about something called the gay cancer. Court started getting rashes and low-grade fevers and night sweats, and we never put the two things together, but we all kept laughing at him that he was the worst hypochondriac any of us had ever seen.
He said to me, look at my arm. I said, what's the matter with it? He said, well, look at it. I said, yeah. He said, look at those things on there. I get more each morning when I wake up. And I said, oh, don't be such a crybaby. It's nothing. I'm sure it's okay.
Estelle began to bring in chicken soup and brisket and chickens, and she was cooking for Court because home-cooked food would cure whatever was wrong with him. Eventually, Court became very ill.
They wouldn't let us into the hospital, first of all. And second of all, we got permission from somebody downstairs to go up and see him. And we got upstairs, and the nurse there said, all right, you people, stand back.
We had to wear masks and gloves and cover ourselves, and nurses wouldn't go near AIDS patients. And the horror of the first years of AIDS is something that no generation should ever have to go through.
She saw a lot of people going through the whole agony of getting sick, and so she became pretty concerned about this. A lot of creative people that she knew and really loved had suffered with this, and it really broke her heart.
She embraced the gay community and people with AIDS in a way that, at the time, few celebrities chose to do.
Estelle lost a lot of her friends, including her nephew, to AIDS. She would use her newfound celebrity to fight this disease.
Every single AIDS event that I've ever been to, she's there. No matter what state of health she's in, she is always there. And I think that that's a true testament to her conviction.
I don't know why more isn't being done. We've spent enough money on things not nearly so meaningful. But still, it goes on.
In the mid-'80s, Estelle left the Broadway stage and went on tour with the Torch Song Trilogy. Her last stop was Los Angeles, where it became a big hit, and Estelle began to meet many power brokers and Hollywood celebrities.
She had been touring for 4 years in Torch Song Trilogy, and she had come to Los Angeles in Torch Song, and I'd gone to see it, and she'd been so wonderful. And the producers had seen her and thought she was so wonderful because this little pixie came on stage and just took over.
Those producers called her in to audition for a television pilot called The Golden Girls. The producers weren't completely convinced that this 61-year-old could play an 81-year-old character. But Estelle would create a role that would be loved by them and all of America.
She's really a phenomenal comedian. She really is, and she's got great timing. And I think she made the most out of that character.
In 1984, Estelle was making the rounds of many Hollywood studios trying to find work. The producers of the NBC pilot, The Golden Girls, were interested in casting Estelle in a small part in the show, but weren't convinced that she could play an 81-year-old woman. Estelle's managers decided to dress her up to look the part.
And they came in with a big bag. I said, "What's that?" They said, "A little something you'll put on before you go to the audition." She sits me down, my manager, and she puts powder on my hair, and she takes out this dress, which is now down to my ankles, and needs 3 belts to keep it up, and little white gloves that they haven't worn in 100 years. And she said, "Now you look like the part." Well, I wouldn't have recognized myself.
The character is a little bit like Mom. I think a little bit like my father, don't tell her this. A little bit like some old Italian ladies that we knew. And it was a composite of a lot of people. Mom was a student of human nature, and to this day, she watches people and watches mannerisms. And she remembers them, she uses it. It's all material for her.
Estelle was cast in the role of Sophia Petrillo in NBC's pilot of The Golden Girls. She walked onto the set starstruck because she would be working with television luminaries Rue McClanahan, Betty White, and B. Arthur.
So there I was going to be Arthur's dressing room. I couldn't believe it. I stood back a little and I said, this was the week that I turned on television, and believe it or not, you know what was on? Name. And she turned to me and she said, "Please."
There has never been, prior to the show, any kind of a mother-daughter relationship like we had, which was really hysterical. I mean, the love-hate, and of course the difference in size, the whole thing. I mean, it was absolutely made in heaven.
I don't think, at that early point, I don't think she was intended to be in every show. Well, of course, she walked in, did her thing, and she was ours from then on. So it was a wonderful foursome.
Estelle's transition into television was exciting, but it was a very difficult experience for her since she'd never worked on a television series before.
I was always telling Estelle, now you'll get the hang of this, believe me. You will catch on to how this is done. It's very similar to acting. It feels like acting, except that the timing is just one beat off because you have to wait for that camera to get to you.
And Estelle was just there frozen. You thought she's never going to be able to take a step out on that stage.
I was so terrified that I'm going to freeze in this spot and not be able to move. And yet my mouth was going. Terrifying experience, because you know that there are several million people watching you.
Well, I can't believe this. You rented a dirty movie?
Dirty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, maybe that's a little dirty.
Estelle overcame her fears and not only became a part of a phenomenally successful show, but she also delivered a breakout performance every week.
Ma, we did not get a VCR so that you could watch dirty movies.
I'm 81. What are you worrying about? You think I'm going to find someone down in the center to do that with?
I mean, here's a little woman who's had a stroke, just enough to completely erase her sense of social propriety, so that she can say anything and get by with it.
She was brilliant in that role. And the contrast between her and B. Arthur, who's, 6'2", towering, and this tiny little twerp of a woman, I think played so well. And the chemistry of that show, that's one of the best sitcoms ever on TV, I think.
I've seen so many really wonderful actors, who once they're told it's a comedy they're playing, they turn into God knows what. I mean, they're no longer human beings, you know what I mean? They go mad. And she was able to simply sustain, take her time, and invest in the character that she played.
She's one of the reasons for the success of the show with young people. I think they get such a kick out of little Estelle telling Big B off and B knuckles under to her and everything. I think that's part of the success.
The writers were very good to me. They loved doing things because, first of all, they knew that they could always get a line at the end. They could always get a button.
Sophia was probably the smartest and the most sage of anybody there because she'd seen it all. She'd been there, done that. And Rose's naivete, just sometimes she could handle it, but most times she just couldn't. And Rose was such a sitting duck, she couldn't resist popping her off every chance she got.
Dorothy, I hope you didn't fix breakfast for me. I'm not eating home this morning. Someone's buying me breakfast.
Someone?
Okay, quit badgering me. It's Alvin.
Alvin from the boardwalk?
No, Rose, Alvin from the Chipmunks.
It's her delivery, you know. She takes that beat, has that deadpan, and then, you know. She's really a phenomenal comedian. She really is. And she's got great timing. And I think she made the most out of that character.
The character Sophia became so popular with audiences that NBC asked Estelle to do double duty and play Sophia on their other hit comedy, Empty Nest.
Charlie, no more of your babes in this house.
I'm back.
She did Empty Nest a lot because they were neighbors, of course, just down the street. So, and every time she'd show up in any context, it was like seeing an old, dear, beloved, welcome friend.
I moved back into Shady Pines. Why don't you come down sometime and play doctor?
Well, dear, it's nice to see you haven't lost your sense of humor.
Oh, but I lost my sense of taste. Nothing.
Sophia, you going to be at Shady Pines permanently?
At my age, I'm not going to be anywhere permanently.
The combination of two hit shows and an unforgettable character in Sophia made Estelle one of the biggest stars in network television.
How could anyone think they're going to have a life that went from virtual obscurity to being world famous?
The TV was a wonderland. Instead of being exposed to a few thousand people a night, she was being exposed to tens of millions of people at night. And the fan mail and the accolades and all that, these were all unbelievable events.
She was able to handle this almost, it appears, overnight stardom. I mean, discounting the years and years and years of auditioning and trying.
We went to see a movie together, and it was so funny to walk through the Beverly Center with all these people. You know, normally I walk through the Beverly Center and it's, hey, Rosie, hey, Rosie, hey, Rosie. I walk through and everyone's like, Estelle, Sophia, Estelle, you know.
During the late 80s, Estelle as Sophia Petrillo was recognized by more people than any other celebrity on TV. She used her immense popularity to bring even more attention and money to the fight against AIDS.
Her main focus was raising funds for AIDS, and the main reason for that is she's incredibly popular in the gay community, stemming from her work in Torch Song Trilogy. She's always had numerous gay friends, and they're the ones who really put her on top. So when it came time to raise funds for something, she said, you guys, I've lost too many of you, and I will raise funds as best I can, and she did it all the time.
Estelle became every gay person's mother. When she walked down the street, gay people grabbed her and kissed her and hugged her, and that's the way she was treated.
In some of the gay bars, on the night that we were on, Saturday nights, they'd close down the dancing. When Golden Girls came on, everybody would watch Golden Girls, and the music would start up, and they'd start dancing again, which was lovely, and I'm sure that was all for Estelle.
Do you think I should tell Rose and Blanche?
Jean is a nice person. She happens to like girls instead of guys. Some people like cats instead of dogs. Frankly, I'd rather live with a lesbian than a cat. Unless the lesbian sheds, that I don't know.
With stardom, Estelle's life changed rapidly, but her husband Arthur didn't like the fast-paced Hollywood lifestyle and didn't want to move to Los Angeles. Estelle and Arthur agreed to live apart, but the two remained married.
They're still married, you know, they're still a couple in some sense, even though they lived their lives apart.
It was a funny marriage always, in that my mother was pursuing the theater all the time, so they didn't really spend a lot of time together to begin with. So when they asked my mother to move out to the West Coast to pursue a career out there, my father encouraged her to do it, but he had a business to run.
I haven't lived with my rabbi in years. No, really, I mean, just because people live together doesn't make it a good marriage. Just because they don't doesn't make it a bad marriage.
It was a major decision for her to move to California and leave her whole life as it was. And I don't think she ever regretted it because, of course, she was so highly successful, and she and her family would stay in touch, of course. But it's a major adjustment.
They always say to me, how long are you married? I said, 52 years. You married 52 years. How do you keep a marriage like that going and be exciting and interesting? I said, how the hell should I know?
In 1988, Estelle was acknowledged by her peers with an Emmy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Sophia.
Picture it, California, 1988. This is such a big thrill, and I know that I can't take too much time, but I want to thank the immediate world.
But she was even more grateful for the opportunity she had to make millions of people laugh on a weekly basis.
If I've done anything to make something easier or more genuine or more caring because of something I said or did, then I'm glad.
In 1991, the Golden Girls completed 7 successful seasons when B. Arthur decided to leave the show.
I had told all of them that I wanted out. I thought 7 years was enough.
The Golden Girls may have become part of television history, but Estelle and America weren't through with Sophia just yet. In 1992, after The Golden Girls finished its run, the producers decided to continue the series without B. Arthur and rename it Golden Palace. Estelle, Rue, and Betty were on their own.
The idea was that these 3 ladies, after this protected environment where they all protected each other, had to go out and face the world. They bought this hotel in Miami, and they had to really face life, which they hadn't had to do to that extent in the other format.
I think she really had more fun in Golden Palace than she had in Golden Girls. I saw a weight lift off her shoulders when we went into Golden Palace, and I think she truly enjoyed every week of that.
Golden Palace couldn't quite seem to find its audience and was canceled after only 1 year.
Unfortunately, the writing would fall back on characters that we all knew and that people wanted to see. So pretty soon we were doing Golden Girls in the lobby rather than approach life for these women.
In 1993, Estelle finally retired Sophia and a part of television history. Since then, she appeared in a few television and movie roles. But something changed about Estelle. The work began to be more difficult for her.
My mother does not have the physicality to enjoy the benefits of a success. She did for a while, and then her mobility was compromised, and it saddens me.
Estelle's walk was different. Her speech was slowed up, very slow. Her responses were slow, and her gait was off at times, and there were times when we were talking when she would drift, and we were all extremely concerned.
With respect to her difficulties with moving and balance, the most we have been able to say is that she has a disorder of her walking and she has a disorder of her balance, and that it fits a Parkinsonian syndrome. We have attempted to treat Estelle with various medications that are used to treat Parkinson's disease. So at times, people who take these medications may appear to be a little bit confused, or they may have difficulty concentrating or remembering things.
I keep hoping they'll get physically better so that I'll be able to do some of the things I want to do. Do I do it? Sometimes I do. Most of the time I don't.
And that I've encouraged Estelle to remain as positive as she can and not to withdraw from her friends and not to withdraw from social interactions, but to keep as active as possible on a day-to-day basis.
Mom always said, you know, her favorite sound was the sound of human laughter. And I still think for Mom that's the paramount importance. She's somebody who likes to entertain. If she were to meet you, she wants to entertain you. With the memory lapses and the losses and the diminished capacities, she no longer functions so much as an entertainer as she used to. And she really lived to entertain people.
It's hard. I was always very, very movable and active and going and coming and doing. And to lose any part of my freedom so late in life is almost devastating.
At 77 years old, Estelle Getty continues to bring smiles to the faces of the people she meets with her wit and charm. She still receives huge amounts of fan mail, and she now realizes what a difference she's made for millions of people by allowing them to forget about their worries for a moment and laugh with their favorite Golden Girl.
There's people whose whole day revolves around seeing Golden Girls, and the high point of their day is seeing Estelle Getty, you know, peeling off one-liners in Golden Girls. And I think Mom wants to let those fans know that, you know, she appreciates, you know, that, and is glad that she was able to bring some joy and some happiness and certainly laughter into people's life.
What greater gift in life than to make people smile for a living? That's great. You take the pressures off it. For a half hour they get to laugh, and they feel so much better about life, and that's what almost everybody has expressed to me. Your mother has brought great joy to my life.
I just miss working with her. I don't think there'll ever be another relationship I have that will be quite as fulfilling as that.
I must tell you, when people see me on the street, the first question they ask me is, how's the old lady? How's Sophia? Oh, she was my favorite. And I always say, wait a minute. You're talking to me and she's your favorite. But I have to admit, she was my favorite too. So I think that's what she'll remain. I think she'll remain people's favorite.
There have been many women in my life, older women, who look at me and see a motherless kid, you know, and there's a vulnerability to me, I think, that maybe is not shown on my show or is not shown in the New York tough bravado, but that older women, mothers, can see. And so I think for her, I'm the daughter that she didn't have, and for me, she's the mom that I didn't have. And it's a nice match.
I've always wanted to make people laugh, and that's all I've ever directed my life towards, is making people laugh.